team, Katie here from Equestrian Movement, and I just wanted to do a little training today on what is holistic horse training and how are you going to incorporate it in your training with your horse. So what it means to be a holistic horse trainer is that we can look at the horse as a whole. So we're looking at how the training that we're doing with our horses shapes out their emotions and their posture and their I guess like a mental ability and intellect to be able to understand how we're communicating with them and for them to be able to communicate back to us. So we're looking at cue training for communication, not control, helping our horse organize their emotions and organizing our horse's body for good posture. If when we're training, we can always check back in with ourselves and ask ourselves, has my training session made my horse more confident in itself and in me and in moving forward together in partnership? Has my training session made communication clearer and allowed my horse to communicate its needs and be able to set their own boundaries with us as well? And has my training session improved my horse's overall posture and increased their soundness, therefore improving their athleticism? If you can reflect on those three criteria as you're going through your training, you will be able to have the confidence to know you are doing the best thing for your horse and by your horse. And the bonus part of working for your horse and with your horse this way is that when we incorporate trainings like consent, we don't have to know all of the answers because we can ask our horses. So when we use consent and choice with our horses and we are getting stuck on issues like, do I need to rug my horse? What bridle do they prefer? What saddle do they prefer? What gel pad do they prefer? What bit do they prefer? If we get stuck on these questions and we're trying to figure out what the best choice for our horse is, when we come from this direction with our training, we can just ask our horses and they can tell us what they prefer. It goes all the way down to our training tools. So one of our trainings that you might see us having done is asking Gunnar what kind of training tool he would like to work with. We can play with would he prefer the dressage whip, or we have a little feather duster thing that we use with the cats and different cat toys because they've got the stick on the end, and we also have one of those little wooden ponies. So you can choose a variation of tools that you've seen that you can use to give your horse the choice of how they would like you to communicate with them. I've even seen one trainer use one of those really long peacock feathers in replacement of the dressage whip. But for Gunnar, he actually ended up choosing the dressage whip, and I think it was because he preferred the clarity of knowing what the correct response to the question we were asking was when it came from the dressage whip, as opposed to the other tools that we were only just introducing him to. So holistic horse training is being able to work with our horses in a way that every situation that we put them into, they are building more confidence within us and within themselves. When we put them into challenging situations and environments, and when we're working towards our big goals, if we overface our horse in the process because we're trying to achieve something that they're not quite ready for yet, that's when our horse is going to lose confidence in themselves, and so they're going to stop trying, they're going to start getting worried, and then we're basically going to start trigger stacking situations and scenarios and environments until they cannot control their behavior anymore. A horse that can't control their emotions can't control their behavior. And so it's really important for us to be aware of where our horse's emotional state is in response to the work that we're doing with them and what we're asking of them. That means that we have to be incredibly sensitive to the body language that they are giving us, which describes their emotional state before it becomes a behavior. The behaviors are basically at that point that our horse is shouting at us now. If we can recognize the smaller, more subtle ways that our horse is telling us, maybe we need to take a moment and let them relax. before we continue. Maybe we need to fill their emotional cup. Maybe we need to unpack some fear, some worry, some frustration. And what we're going to try and do is reshape that emotion into a positive experience towards the training session that we're doing. And really, truly, this is the hardest part of our training. The easy part is training cues. Once you get to the point where you understand how easy a cue is to train into your horse, it should really only take 5 to 10 minutes to train in an entry-level basic cue for communication. So what I call a single A cue, where we have one word, one cue that is going to elicit one response, should only take one training session. Depending on your horse's breed, maybe it will take a little bit longer and a couple extra training sessions, but mostly the horses should be able to grasp the understanding of the behavior that we want in response to the cue within a single training session, because there is a process of how we explain the way that we're going to ask them and to reinforce that behavior, where if we keep showing them this consistently, when we introduce the ask, they know to look for the behavior, to look for the word, and then we know to mark it and reward it. And so then, we're not creating a whole new training environment, a whole new training scenario every time we want to introduce a new cue to them. We're showing them from the beginning, this is how I'm going to create words for us to communicate with. When we go through this process, we're doing a new word, and then they're like, okay, what's the word? What's the behavior? And then we can consolidate that and move forward. The cue training part is the really easy part. It's the emotional self-regulation that's difficult for our horses, is that the behavior and the emotion are really tightly linked initially, especially with young horses and green horses. They feel the emotion, it triggers the behavior. What we're trying to do is we're trying to put a stop on the behavior and a stop on an emotion, and then reshape that emotion so that we can reshape that behavior. And that's where things can get a little bit harder, especially when we've been working with horses that have trauma in their past. We need to also rewire their fear response and their trust response to us as well. And then lastly, it's really important that we're not working our horses for submission to the bit, for submission to the contact, for control. Because as soon as we start using rein pressure to manipulate our horse's movement, we are going to make them off balance, and we're not going to make the best choices for how to hold themselves, how to balance, and how to hold their posture. When we get rewarded for things like the quality of frame, the quality of bend, all of that kind of thing, if we've used our reins to influence that, then that's not going to be in the horse's best posture, because they have to counterbalance the pressure that we're putting into their mouth from that bit pressure. We need to ask them to first hold their posture, stack their posture, hold their balance first, and then seek the contact, work to our hands, and then we can start to influence a little bit of the quality of their posture and the quality of their balance. But mostly we're just trying to stay out of the road. We're saying stack your posture, make sure that you're not crooked, make sure that you're through using your whole back, make sure you're carrying me. But mostly I just want to stay out of your road, stay out of your mouth, and then ask you to find me. Once you're finding me and you have the potential for the range of movement that I'm asking for, then maybe sometimes I'm going to say, okay, what's your next best effort? Can you take the effort that you're putting into this movement and give me a little bit more? What does that look like? That's fine. Awesome. Well done. Let's go back into some conditioning exercises. So the way that you put your training exercises together works twofold. It works to create the horse's ability to do the work that you want to do with them. And it also works because while you're working through that exercise, you're cue training at the same time. So after a period of 3 to 6 months, your horse is now going to be able to do that extra level, that higher level of work, because you've done 6 months of conditioning in a particular exercise, in the process of doing that 6 months of conditioning in that particular exercise, you've been communicating how to work into that exercise. And as a result of that, you now have a cue to communicate to your horse how you want them to hold that way. So what we're trying to do physically is we're trying to create like really thorough, consistent, like foundational work with them, and then we're layering in the next skill. And when we layer in the next skill, they're not going to be ready for it. They aren't going to do it perfectly. It's like, people do the leg yield for the first time and think that they're going to get a competition quality leg yield. No, you're not going to get a competition quality leg yield until you've been doing it for 6 to 18 months. You've got to, do the movement for the horse to build the muscles to be able to do the movement well. Just because you're excelling at 20-meter circles does not mean that you're going to now excel at leg yields. You've got to go through the process. You've got to, get them doing the movement, and a result of doing the movement is they're going to build the muscles to do the movement better, and the more they do the movement, the better they do their movement. And so when we try to influence that movement and control that movement and try and make it better with our body, all we're doing is getting in our horse's road and making it harder for them to do it well and harder for them to balance within the movement. So it's really important that we can sit up, sit still, get out of their road and say, this is the direction we're going, this is how I'm going to communicate that to you, this is how I want you to carry yourself. Now go give it a go. What does that look like when you do it for me? And then over time, that quality is going to build just through repetition for the horse, that consistency of, the first time you go to the gym and you do a squat with a barbell, you're going to be absolute trash at it, and you're going to spend the first 6 months just working on posture and making sure your squat is right, otherwise you're going to throw you back out. So it's the same thing with the horses. We can't put them into a leg yield and expect them to do that show level leg yield the first time. You've got to give them that 6 months to organize their body and coordinate their balance before we start refining the quality that they give. And that's the same the whole way through the training scale. And in the process, we're saying, how are you responding to me emotionally? Are you going sour on this training? Should we mix it up? Do we need to go hack out? Do we need to put some grids in? Do we need to do some poles? Do you need to do something a little bit more mentally stimulating than just drilling figures in the arena? And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to make learning fun, make training fun, make movement feel good, make learning fun, and then allowing your horse to communicate its needs to you, helping them organize their emotions if they're spooky or frustrated or whatever it is. And then that's when we're going to get a horse that really enjoys the work that it's doing and wants to work with us and for us, and they consent the whole way through to being ridden, and they ask to be ridden. So that's a little bit about what holistic horse training is. If you're interested in knowing more about the emotional self-regulation, we have just done a podcast on that. So jump over to our podcast channel, the first Do No Harm with Equestrian Movement, and have a listen to how I have had to do a lot of emotional self-regulation with the horses. I've basically made a career out of checking myself before I wreck myself when I am working with horses. Thanks for watching. Bye.